righty. Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Queensborough President Donovan Richards, and I am the Queensborough President for our great borough of Queens. I think I said I'm the borough president. I would like to thank all who have joined our virtual annual Reso A Grant and Capital Fund Workshop. I would like to thank all of the principals, assistant principals, parent coordinators, teachers, PTAs, and CECs for all your work during this time of COVID. I know it has not been easy, and on behalf of the people of Queens, I thank you. And let me just put on my personal hat as a parent of a 5-year-old. I want to thank you all for what you do every day. You deserve a raise, you deserve everything, whatever you want, you deserve. This workshop is important so that all principals of schools and education stakeholders know the process of how they can get Reso A grants from my office, the City Council, and capital funding from the School Construction Authority. I know when I was a council member, I gave millions, like 40 million in Reso A grants to many of the schools watching this afternoon. My application deadline is February 25th at 5 p.m. sharp. So let me say that again. My application deadline is February 25th at 5 p.m. sharp, so not 5:01. Monica has already emailed out the link to all the schools, so please check your emails. If you didn't receive the link, please email education@queensbp.org, education@queensbp.org, and the link will be forwarded to you, or you can find it on my website at www.queensbp.org. Once again, www.queensbp.org. We have an important workshop today with a lot of information, so I would like to start the meeting by first introducing my staff. Monica, my education director, Richard Lee, my special advisor, Amanda, who is my budget director, and Deborah Dillingham, who's the Queens PEP representative, and Ariella Davidov, our education coordinator, Carolina Gill, and Tiffany Easton will be monitoring the Zoom. Chris Barker, my press representative, will be monitoring our meeting on our home webpage, and Aldo Grillo is our computer tech director, who also will be on as well. Okay, so now that I'm finished, I'm going to turn this over to Monica to take us through this. But I want to just thank many of my friends, and I think Brian McGinn is on, I think. I want to thank him for all the work that we've done over the course of the last 2 decades, working together to make sure that many of the projects that we fund actually come to fruition. And I always give a big hats off to the SCA for the work that they do, because it is really one of the agencies that we always say is a model of how to get projects done. And it may not be perfect, as no agency is perfect, but it's as perfect as it's going to get in the city of New York for sure. So I'm going to turn this meeting over to Monica to run, because I do have to run to Elmhurst Hospital in a little while. But I want to thank each and every one of you. Please get to know the staff here, and please get your applications in on time. So thank you, Monica, and thank you to all of the school administrators and everyone who's on today. So thank you for being here.
Thank you, Borough President. Thank you for everything that you do for the Borough of Queens. This afternoon, I want to introduce the staff from the SCA. We have Brian McGinn, who's the Director of Operations from the School Construction Authority. He's also joined by Bianca Almedina from Capital Management. So Brian's going to be talking about how schools can get Reso A money, what qualifies for Reso A money. He's going to talk about that process. After he speaks, we're going to have Richard Lee. He is the Special Assistant Advisor to the Borough President. And you know Richard Lee from past workshops that we've had. He's going to be talking about the participatory budget, as well as the Borough President's funding. Then I'm going to go on and I'm going to talk about the $19.1 billion. Yes, you heard correct. I didn't say million. Billion with the B, from the School Construction Authority, capital funding. So that's going to be exciting to hear. We also have Isaac Carmignani. He is the mayor's appointee on the PEP, and he's going to be talking about the importance of the CECs, the roles the CECs play when it comes to the capital funding for the SCA. Isaac used to be a CEC president in the Borough of Queens. I also want to introduce Bianca Medina. Amanda, so many new names. Amanda Menichini. Amanda, if you're there, if you could just wave. Amanda's the new director of budget for the borough president. So a lot of the school principals will be communicating with Amanda. So just want to thank everybody. And if we could just start with Brian McGinn, he's going to be starting with a PowerPoint presentation. After the PowerPoint presentation, we're just going to leave all the questions for the end. Everybody who's participating or who RSVP'd will get the PowerPoint presentation this afternoon. Okay. All right, great. Brian, take it away. Do you hear me there? Are you, Brian?
Yeah, I got you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Brian.
My pleasure. Before I share the screen, I just wanted to go over a couple of quick things. First, we all hope you're doing well during these, crazy, difficult times. It's certainly been a challenge for all of us. So hope you guys are plugging along. We want to thank the borough president for inviting us to this forum. This really is a great way to get information out to a lot of people in a timely fashion. We'd also like to congratulate the borough president, the new borough president. As you heard Donovan mention, I worked with him for many years while he was a council member, and the borough of Queens is truly, truly fortunate. I've never worked with a council member that cared more and committed more to schools. So we're truly fortunate here in Queens to have him as our new borough president. Before we get started on the PowerPoint, wanted to touch on a couple of things. First of all, if you have received an FY fiscal year 20 and or a fiscal year 21 Reso A grant from the borough president or your city council member, the FY 20 funding was just released. As you can imagine, the city was seriously concerned about a financial and budgeting issue, so it froze all capital funding for a while. So the fiscal year 20 funding has been released. You should be hearing from somebody from one of our teams, if you haven't already, to get started on those projects. We hope to have access, hope to have the city release the FY 21 funding shortly. And then again, the same process will be reaching out to you to discuss how you want to proceed with your funding. So we're going to do a quick presentation. We won't go through every page in exhausting detail. And if you can post, Bianca and myself have posted our email addresses in the chat. So if you don't get a chance to ask a question today, you can always email us and we'll get back to you as quickly as possible. All right, let's see if hopefully I do this right. All right. Does everybody see that? Everybody got this?
Yep.
Okay. All right. I'm not too tech savvy. All right. So we're going to go quickly through this presentation. Hopefully it'll answer any questions you have on the process and eligibility. And then we can answer, either in the chat or, a separate email on possible potential projects. So the School Construction Authority, basically this is a page to show who we are. And essentially we're responsible for all capital funding that goes into the school system and for any major construction that goes on in your building. The Resolution A program is basically a way for elected officials, whether it's city council members or borough presidents, to allocate what is referred to as discretionary capital funds to their schools and also their parks and other public agencies in their, in their district, or in this case, their borough. Schools do not apply to the SCA for this funding. As you heard from the borough president, you apply directly through their website. At no point does this funding go to the school. It stays with the School Construction Authority and we manage the project on your behalf. So it won't be showing up in your Galaxy budget. Oops, I think I skipped the page. Hold on. All right. You heard Monica touch briefly on participatory budgeting. The borough presidents tend not to do this as much as the city council does. In this particular fiscal year cycle, it's still a little unclear with, unfortunately, with COVID, whether the council members will be doing it as well. As you see this pie chart here, because there often is confusion with PB funding and Reso A funding. PB is a subset of the Reso A funding. So some people sometimes think they got two grants. They think they got a PB grant and they think they got a Reso A grant. It's the same pot of funding. PB is just a subset of that, of the larger Reso A funding source. These are just some examples, and there's a few of, your many options of things that you can do with Reso A funding. All right, these are some of the eligibility requirements. Recently, the city raised the grant threshold, excuse me, to $50,000. So basically, that means you have to apply for at least a minimum of $50,000. Capital construction projects must be an enhancement to the building. So things like painting and that type of more maintenance type project would not be eligible. Equipment, which really applies to tech, has to have a lifespan of a minimum of 3 years. And tech grants, we're happy to announce, can now not only be used for desktops, laptops, smartboards, but also iPads, Chromebooks, and those types of devices. So that is relatively new, and we're happy that the city finally approved it. All right, there are items that are not eligible. Window air conditioning units. We can provide you the power for the air conditioning units, but we cannot purchase the units themselves. So you would have to have an alternate funding source to, to purchase the units. And we will ask you if you have that funding source prior to starting an window air conditioning job, because the last thing we want to do is spend all that money and find out the schools don't have a way to purchase the air conditioning. Library books are not eligible. Loose furniture as its own project is not eligible. Loose furniture is eligible as part of a larger renovation project, but not as its own project. Photocopiers are not eligible. Software, not eligible. Anything disposable, toner cartridges, paper, anything of that nature, test tubes, vials for a science lab, all are not eligible. Staffing and after school programs are not eligible. So, if you ask us to build you a library and set aside money so you can hire a librarian, you can't use that money for this. All right, here's some just small details about, Reso A projects. The budgets are finite. They're set by the amount of funding that the borough president gives you. There is no, pot of money that we can use to supplement these grants. So just, keep that in mind when you're discussing with your architects, your engineers, or whoever it may be about what you're looking to do. If you receive a grant and we come out and meet with you and we're in your auditorium and you have $500,000 and you say, I want to do my curtains, my seating, air conditioning, an audio visual system, there's a chance we may come back to you and say, you don't have enough money for all that. So when that happens, we set up a three-way conversation with the elected officials office, the SCA, and the school to go over the options. And the options there are basically two options. We either reduce the scope of work for what you've requested, take out the seating, take out the audio visual system, or we get a commitment from the elected official to add funding to the project in the next budget cycle. So these are conversations, once we have the information, that we will initiate among the three parties. Larger projects, athletic fields, green roofs, things of that nature, often take multiple fiscal years to get funded. So you have to be prepared to be in those for the long haul, as they say. It's not something that would be, done in a year like a laptop cart. These are just some timelines so you have a better understanding of, where in the process you may be at any point. Often you'll get a letter in June or July from the borough president saying that you've been awarded, funding for X, Y, and Z. That does not mean we have the money yet. We usually, in normal times, get it in November, December. The last couple of fiscal years, unfortunately, with COVID and potential budget issues, it's taken significantly longer to have it released. So we just don't want you to think if you get that letter, in June 15th, that we're going to be buying you laptops in July. Unfortunately, there's a lot of work that has to be done in between. These are some average costs of projects. Don't let it alarm you. There are some big numbers here, but we can always, work a way to work it out to get you what you need. Okay, this is an important screen. It doesn't really apply to technology because you can get that pricing from FAMIS or Shop DOE. But we really, really strongly ask you not to go anywhere else for estimates for a construction project other than to us, to Bianca, myself, and our contacts in the chat. And there's also a page in the end with all our email addresses. If you go somewhere else for an estimate, they're going to leave factors out like asbestos, custodial fees, assortment of other costs that are associated with these projects, and then you'll not request enough money and your project will end up not really going anywhere. So please come to us for estimates. If you have a construction project, these are the phases that the SCA goes through. The first one is really what is important for the schools. This is the scoping phase, is when we come in and sit with you to discuss what you want to do with the funding. It is not our place to tell you what to do with this funding. If you get funding for a library, it's for your library. We may tell you due to building code, fire department code, that you can't do certain things, but it is not our place to tell you where this job will take place. So this scoping phase is really where you lay out to us what it is you want to accomplish. The other phases are things we're obligated to go through, including bid and award, because this is public funding. And then the phasing schedule is basically when we sit with you at some point and determine when we can work in the building. And usually that would be to adjust for after school programs and things of that nature. But now in the current environment, different factors are coming into play, whether you can give up the space because of social distancing. So we'll coordinate all that with you. We don't just show up one day with a contractor and start, working. It'll all be coordinated through our community relations division. All right. Co-located schools, campuses. There are several spaces in your building that are considered shared spaces: your auditorium, your cafeteria, your gym. For the most part, your library. A lot of high schools, it's the science labs as well. If you are applying for a grant for one of those spaces, first, I think I could speak confidently saying the borough president and his team like to see that all the principals in the building are applying for that grant, that you're all on the same page, that you all agree you want to not only get a grant for the auditorium, but you want that grant to go towards air conditioning the auditorium. If we get, if co-located or a campus receives a grant and we cannot get all the principals to agree to what is to be done in that space, we will not be able to move forward. So, it's important before one of these schools or orgs on a campus applies that they make sure that all the other principals are on board. If the grant is for technology and strictly for your school organization, we just proceed moving forward, with you, with your school, individual school. All right, so now we just have some pictures of schools in Queens that we've worked on. And again, these are just some samples. We've every year new projects come into play. Hydroponics are now the new big thing. STEAM and STEM. We're still a little unclear as to, every school seems to have a different definition of what STEAM and STEM is, but we're happy to work on anything with you as long as it's capitally eligible. So this is the important page. If we don't get to your questions today, by all means, feel free to email all three people on this list, and You give us about a day or two. We are dealing with all 5 boroughs, and there's 3 of us. And give us a day or two, and we will get back to you about any questions you may have about a potential project. We do encourage you to give us as much information as possible in your initial email. Please even include pictures, because if you send Bianca an email saying, I want to upgrade my auditorium, you're just going to get an email back from her saying, what do you want to do in your auditorium? So the more detail you provide initially, it kind of saves us all a little time. So if you want to look into upgrading your playground, send us pictures of the condition of your playground. We're happy to look at it, and then we're happy to get back to you with what we think it will cost. We will not be able to come out to the school. Even prior to COVID, we really weren't able to, just because there's 1,600 school buildings and there's 3 of us. So but we will give you an estimate. If you're a primary school, we'll say the last time we replaced the auditorium seats in a primary school, it cost X amount of dollars. And then, we'll add something to adjust for escalation over, time. So those will be the estimates. Unfortunately, we just can't conduct site visits, every time. So these are questions. Obviously, if you have, Monica, I'm not sure how you want to handle questions on this.
Yeah, so we're gonna wait. I was gonna wait till the end here, but I see we already have 3 questions. So maybe, it's only 3. Maybe we could answer them quickly. I can answer the first one. Is this only for schools, or can this information apply to community organizations? So today the workshop is only for the schools, but the Queensborough president, as well as the city council members, they have funding for not-for-profit organizations in the community to renovate parks, for senior centers, that type of thing. But today, this afternoon, this workshop is only to show schools how they can obtain this money. There's a question here from Vaughn Turner. Why the incredibly tight time frame, mostly over a week-long school break while schools are closed to submit project proposals? I don't know if you want, Mr. Turner, if you can just be a little bit more specific about that question. Are you talking about the major capital stuff, or maybe we can just get back to your question if you could just clarify that one? I have here Thomas Edison High School, Moses O'Hara principal. Hi, Thomas Edison High School has received $100,000 facility work set aside for a new CTE lab. Due to the pandemic, the room was never completed, and the funding did not roll over to this year's budget. We currently have a non-functioning room, and we are seeking some guidance on how to get the room completed. Thank you. Mr. O'Hara, if you can apply for the funding, and I can contact you offline, and we can talk and discuss a little bit more about that. All right, great. So for now, we are going to now continue with Richard Lee, who is going to be talking about how schools can obtain funding from the Queensborough president, and he's also going to be talking about what the process is also for the city council, because they also have grants and they have something called participatory budget, which right now there's been a change with. There's been a lot of major budget cuts, as you all know, because of the pandemic. But Richard can talk a little bit more about that. Take it away, Richard. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And I'm going to tag team with Amanda here.
Hi, everyone.
Yep. It's great seeing everybody. And for our, what is it now, 7th or 8th Reso A training workshop. So I'm going to quickly talk about Reso A funding on the discretionary side at the Borough President's Office, and then I'm going to let Amanda kind of take over to talk about how it works in other city in the city council, plus how to apply for our funding. So like Brian said earlier, Reso A funding is simply capital funding that comes from a discretionary source. The only sources of discretionary funding for the city is the city council and the borough president. And both the city council and the borough president, when it comes to Reso A discretionary capital funding, has a different process. The borough president's office, we have a typical application, and the things that people usually apply for are some of the not larger scale kind of projects, but the smaller scale ones. The school construction authority has a 5-year capital, and so if you did need a major auditorium upgrade, then then the advocacy has to happen with the school construction authority to get your project to be included as part of their 5-year capital plan. But let's say as part of your auditorium, you need new media upgrades, which cost typically between $500,000 to $1 million. That's something that we will be able to cover. Or let's say converting a space, an empty classroom, into a technology lab. Those typically cost about $500,000, and we will be able to cover that. So the capital funding, there, compared to the 5-year capital plan from the School Construction Authority, we do have a lot less amount of dollars, but it isn't to say that we have no dollars. Over the past 7 years, the Borough President's Office has appropriated $78 million towards education, and this is including our old school tech initiatives. Every school should have gotten a tech upgrade. This year, with the budget being that it is a little bit more limited because we don't have the same amount of Reso A funding dollars.
Hi, I'm sorry, Richard. I hate to interrupt. Brian, if you can take down the screen, we can put that information in the Q&A or the chat afterwards. I'm just getting some word here from the Q&A. They're saying to take. Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks. All right, continue, Richard.
What was I saying? I totally lost my train of thought. So over the last couple of years, we did provide funding to our schools in total of about $78 to $80 million. This year, we do have fewer dollars, but that is not to say there aren't any commitments from the Borough President to fund schools. I think we are actively looking to improve as many schools as we can. The one thing I would say, though, is that the Borough President's Office and the City Council, you see, in order for a project to move forward, it has to be fully funded. So if an auditorium project costs $1.5 million and the discretionary amount ended up being $1 million, this project will not be able to move forward. And so what we've been doing is we've been partnering over the last 7 years. Each year, we partner with each individual city council member to jointly fund a lot of our school projects. And so it becomes a joint discretionary Reso A funded project. And in that way, we ensure that things are fully funded. So with that, I'll sort of leave it and say it's incumbent upon individuals to reach out to your city council members in order to figure out what their process is. And at the same time, apply those same projects to our office. There was one question about the tight timeline. We did have our application up, I think, for the last couple of weeks, and I believe all schools were already notified back then that the applications were up. Currently, it is still February 25th. And so if you have any questions related to this, please feel free to reach out to our office. And Amanda, if you want to share any additional info, Amanda, for those of you who don't know, was previously the budget director to Councilwoman Karen Kozlowitz, who was the chair of the Queens City Council delegation. So she ran a lot of the borough's budget side on the City Council Reso A portion. So she can give you a little bit more information on that side, plus anything that I might have missed on the Borough President's Reso A funding.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Richard. I see some familiar names listed on the attendees list, so nice to see you all. So thank you again, SCA, for doing this presentation. A few things that I did want to add is that we're in a very different fiscal year this year, not only, with the budget deficit, but also including that a lot of Queens council members will no longer be here next fiscal year. So this is the last time that they're able to make these funding decisions. So I would just make sure and reiterate that all schools are on the same page with their local city council member. Like Richard said, we do partner with a lot of projects, and we would like to see every project fully funded. So with that in mind, I definitely wouldn't start looking into funding a brand new project that you don't think would be fully funded. I would definitely look into, what has been started, or maybe something that's not fully funded, because that's definitely something we want to get done. Right before this meeting, I did check to see how many applications we have in. Right now, we only have 38 applications in, so that's definitely something to keep in mind. If you have any questions about what you think is eligible or what might not be eligible, feel free to reach out to us. Our application is very simple. On the city council side, individual members may have different ways of doing things. For example, one member might have their own Google form you'd like to fill out that they need you to fill out. Another member might just say, email us your request and put it in priority order. So that's definitely something that I would take into account. Definitely reach out to all your members. And like Richard said, we'd love to coordinate with the local city council members. Thank you.
One quick thing on participatory budgeting, PB. I know Brian kind of mentioned this before. The PB process, it's not a separate bucket of funding, like Brian said. PB is simply a process of choosing which projects to fund. But I believe that this year, a lot of our members are not doing participatory budgeting anymore. Amanda, if you could just expand. I wasn't sure if it was a city council-wide PB or if it was just individuals not doing PB.
Yeah, I forgot to bring that up. I'm sorry. Thank you, Richard. So a lot of council members in the past did participate in PB. That was something that the speaker of the city council also spearheaded and really gave a lot of resources to each individual council member if they had chose to do PB. Right now, it's very unclear if the city council as a whole is implementing PB. That being said, each council member, it's their discretionary money. If they want to, they could technically do PB. As of right now, I do not know of any Queens council members that have still opted in to commit to PB.
Hi, Rich, if I could just add something, because there was a question there that how come the deadline was the 25th when school's out? So basically the borough president, he creates the deadlines according to him. So we don't run the schools. The borough president does everything according to his schedule and how we run things here at Borough Hall. So just because school's out doesn't mean that he has to wait until school's back. So just like schools, they have their deadlines and we have our deadlines here. So
and our application has been up for several weeks already. So people who didn't get a chance to view it until now, it has been open for a few weeks. And I believe Monica had already sent out to all of our principals, alerting them that our Reso A application was up. I think the first or it may have been the second week of January. So it's been up for a while now.
If the schools didn't get it, because there was something that was sent last week. Again, so if you can just email education@queensbp.org, we'll be more than happy to resend the application. Okay, great. So are we good, Richard, with your presentation? Okay, wonderful.
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah,
and if anyone has any questions, we'll take it at the end.
Yeah, we'll
type it into. I'll also be answering questions that are typed and typing up the answers to questions people are posting. If anyone has any questions that way as well.
Okay, great. All right, wonderful. So now we're going to talk about the big money, right? The big bucket money, which is, what is it? $19.1 billion. How can schools tap into that major money? So there's a whole process. So the School Construction Authority, for those who don't know, what they do is they do all the construction in the schools. They do from exterior masonry, and what I mean by exterior masonry, we're talking about, the brick outside. They do the parapets, the walls that are in the roof. They do roofs. They do new windows. They do brand new schools, school extensions. They do all kinds of, they remove the tiles from all the floors, new bathrooms, new gyms. And as you know, a lot of these buildings, a lot of these school buildings are pretty old. So of course, a lot of these buildings have asbestos and they have lead. Now, in 1978, lead was banned from construction, but a lot of these school buildings have been up from before 1978. So when a school is going to be submitting for, let's say, for example, they need an electrical upgrade, right? Everything now is technology. A lot of these schools are old. So a lot of the buildings need that electrical upgrade. What comes with an electrical upgrade? You have asbestos through the walls. You have asbestos, you have lead paint. So that's an additional cost. When the School Construction Authority does the abatement of asbestos or lead, they do with nobody in the building. They take advantages of weekends and holidays. We're talking about this was during the time before COVID. So that's an additional amount of money. So, I'm always here if a school needs to know, or Brian McGinn, like a money amount as to how much something can cost. For example, there's schools that are overcrowded. right? And they want to know, well, what's the process for them to get a school extension? Or perhaps they are using another school, co-located in another school, and they would finally like their building, like the Academy of American Studies. So that's a process through the Community Education Council, CECs, which Isaac Carmignani is going to be talking about later on. So that's a process where you can go to the CECs. CECs cover from elementary to junior high school, and for the high schools, they have CCHS, Citywide Council on High Schools. We are going to be sending out who the contacts are for each school district. Each school district has a CEC, CEC 24, CEC 25, depending on the school district. We will be sending that information after the workshop so that schools can contact them. Now, the deadline for the CECs to submit to the schools already passed was January 15th, but I was told today by the School Construction Authority that CECs can still submit schools in the list that they have already submitted. So that's an important factor to remember. Now, what is capital money? We're talking about millions of dollars, right? We're not talking about, like, sometimes I get phone calls and they'll tell me, oh, you know, there's a tile out of place. We have a few tiles out of place. So we have a doorknob that, you know, just doesn't close correctly. That is not capital money. That is not Reso money. That is money from the custodial staff. So that's another pocket of money. So you have the pocket of money of the custodial staff, right? Which is little items like little paint here, doorknobs here. Something happens with the toilet bowl and they have to, you know, remove the apparatus or whatever is broken. So there is a budget for that. That budget is way smaller, of course, than the capital budget. And then you have the Reso A, which Brian spoke about. And then you have the capital, the bigger stuff. For example, sometimes you would think, you know, bathrooms can be Reso A. Yes, but if the school needs a complete renovation of all the bathrooms, where they'll do it like one floor at a time, or they'll figure out how to do it, since obviously, you know, they're going to need the bathrooms. That can cost a lot of money. That can be capital money as well. Why? Because we're talking about when you include the cost of asbestos abatement and lead, all of that adds up. You know, they're trying to make all the bathrooms ADA compliant and accessible. So, you know, that's very important. There's nothing that messes up a building more than water, right? Because with water, if you get water infiltration, you're going to get mold. That's a major problem. We don't want teachers getting sick, students, or the principal or the staff. So that's very important to make sure that the roof is working. I remember in the past, there was a school where literally they had buckets all along the classroom with water coming down. Okay, and it was great that the SEA came in and gave them a renovation of the roof. Now, that particular project was not included in the list that the CEC had submitted. So that's why these workshops are very important, so that principals and stakeholders know the process on how to submit for a school project. So it's very important. Another thing I want to add also is, please keep in mind that the community education councils, they're all parent volunteers. They run for office, and then you have two that are appointed by our office, by the borough president. So many of these CECs, they're new people, and that's why we have this workshop, so that they can learn about Reso A money and capital money and what the process is. The DOE, or the Department of Education, they do their own diligence in doing the class for the CECs, but it has been my experience in the past many times when I see the list of items that were submitted by a CEC, they'll put air conditioners in there, they'll put, you know, they need renovation of tiles, you know, little tiles here and there. And what happens is most of the stuff on that list does not fall under capital. And so now that CEC left money, billions of dollars on the table, and shortchange that school district. So that's why it's very important. And I just want to thank everybody who has joined us today and who are watching through YouTube and through our website. It's important that you know this stuff. before COVID, I used to do a lot of walkthroughs. I used to get principals who used to call me and say, can you do a walkthrough of the building and see, what we need? And I used to do it. And what that would entail is I would go start from the top, and I would have the custodian open up all the doors, because I would have sometimes schools that would say they had no space. And then I would find space because I would find underutilized rooms, right? Rooms that were just packed with old computers and old printers, like a stock room that you can, if you clean that up and if you knock down the wall, you can create another classroom, instructional classroom. So, those walkthroughs were important. Now, because of COVID, is a little bit tough, but you can still reach out to me. I could do virtual walkthroughs, right? If you have staff in the school building and you walk through, we can arrange something like that, and I can see what's needed. So it's very important that the school principals know who the CEC members are. Now, for high schools, it's a little bit different. They are under what they call the Citywide Council on High School, CCHS, and we are going to be sending out who the representatives are. So the representative is Olga Addison and Betsy Tam Green. All right, so the high schools can reach out to them to make sure that your high school is placed on that list, and that list that they submit to the school construction authority. That is imperative. If you don't get on that list, now you want to make sure also that what you are requesting is capital eligible. So you can always reach out to me. You can send me an email and I can walk you through the process or answer any questions you may have. Also, let me see, I'm trying to see what else. Okay, so with the abatement usually costs, that brings up a project, the cost of a project a lot, because, it's especially now, I can imagine even more so with the pandemic going on, because construction has continued. They stopped for a while because of the pandemic, and then they restarted again. But, I just want to let principals know that a lot of projects have been funded by the Borough President's Office. Altogether, has been about $80 million that has been given to schools. There have been over 32 schools that have been constructed, new schools and school extensions. Okay, and there's, I believe, a couple of more, but I believe it's about 20 more to go. Projects that are either in the planning stages or are about to or already in construction. So, if your project does not get funded for a certain reason, and it's not because you filled out the application wrong or because the category that it falls under, like I said, it's not capital or maybe Reso or whatever, just you can call me and I can always, walk everybody through that. But another thing I want to add about the CECs is that these are parent volunteers, and many times, like I had mentioned, they don't know how to fill out the Reso A form. And so, just please, if you reach out to them, they can reach out to us too, CECs. I reach out to them, but, there's so much that I can do. There's a lot of really great CEC presidents in the Borough of Queens, and then there's some CECs in the past that, they will bicker, and I'm going to be truthful with you. They forget that they're there for the kids, and, they will bicker amongst themselves. And I remember some years ago, there was a CEC that they were harassing some of the members on the CEC to the point that they didn't even realize that their school district, a specific area, was not part of the capital plan, and that would have been disastrous with a lot of construction going on. So, it's very important that you really know what this process is. You could always reach out to me at education@queensbp.org or mgutierrez@queensbp.org, and I'll be more than happy to answer questions. So now I'm going to introduce Isaac Carmignani. He is the mayor's appointee to the panel for education policy, and he's also a former CEC president. So Isaac, if you can take it away, thanks.
Thank you, Monica. I was just looking through my previous notes. I think I've been doing these with you since 2016, something like that. It's been a while. Wow, thanks for having me on. So talking specifically about CECs, I think Monica went over very well how this works, the differences between capital dollars and Reso A and so forth. So I'm gonna make a few points here. The CECs and funding, really, they interface with all aspects of funds requests, but mostly through a capital plan. And what happens is, of course, this has changed a little bit with COVID, but somewhere from November to January, somewhere in there, folks like Brian McGinn come out and speak with the CECs and discuss pretty much what Brian had on that PowerPoint, but they get district specific. So you get a chance, if you can tie into those Zoom calls or those meetings. I don't know if you have any more, Brian, but to learn what's happening in your specific district. Okay, let's say that you missed that, all right? You still have a chance here. I don't know, Brian, if you mentioned when is the deadline for the CECs to interface with SCA on capital plan requests, but I heard there was an extension there or something. In any event, the CEC has input in terms of suggesting what they think are priorities. So when I do these presentations, I always give an example of PS2 in District 30 many years ago now, where they needed bathroom renovations, they needed a gym, they needed a cafeteria, they had these old multi-purpose rooms. And every year they would come to our meetings. They even made T-shirts. They just went all out to raise their school's issues to the surface. Doing these workshops, there is a teacher, I think it's IS 73, South Ozone Park, like that area, that we've talked a lot, and she has gotten for her school millions of dollars from understanding how this process works. So if you're having issues and you feel you haven't been getting traction, you need to kind of make noise. You kind of need to be that squeaky wheel. But interface with your CEC, because what happens is they prioritize what they see as the biggest needs, because in theory anyway, they're to understand the district as a whole. So while you might feel that your issue is the biggest, there may be ones that are larger. So that's why the CEC is there. I think it's very important to find common ground. At the beginning of this call, if I saw my video off, it's because I was on with DOE talking about stuff that comes in Reso A money, a lot of it, and it has to do with technology. So right now, we're trying to close this digital divide. So everybody wants Chromebooks, everybody wants iPads, everybody wants devices. And the problem now that DOE is having is the multiplicity of devices are not all capable of the security features and the enterprise level features that they would want for their students. Some of them are not LTE enabled. And so then that creates problems, because now if a student doesn't have internet connectivity, they still have to connect to get their remote learning. So what I'm trying to say is, to the extent that you are advocating that you're talking with your CEC and you're talking with DOE before you purchase. We had something like this at IS 227 years ago. Our PTA, we went and bought tons of air conditioners. Problem is, they weren't compatible with the windows we were putting them through. We had no power for them, so they just sat in the basement. Eventually that problem was solved, but the point is finding common ground, talking with everyone, kind of being that bridge. It's nice if you have one person in the school that does that. It's in the case of IS 73, and that way you can, you can maybe catch some of the communications, gaps and fill them. I'm going to put my email in the chat, because a lot of questions that I've answered have been of individuals, and so I'm more than happy. You have Monica as an expert. I'm on the PEP, and I deal with some of these issues quite a bit. Deborah is also on this call, and so there's some good resources here. Thanks, Monica.
Thank you, Isaac. I just wanted to add also, and Rich or Amanda, if you can jump in, if it's important to, when you and I'm going to be talking about the Reso A. When you're going to apply for the Reso A, just don't put there, I need computers. We need to know how many computers you need, and what are you talking about? Are you talking about laptops, or are you talking about desktops? So, that's very important, because I remember in years past, there have been, applications where they're like, yeah, we want computers. And then we're like, okay, that's nice. How many do they want? And what are they talking about? Desktops or laptops? So it's very important to be specific. Don't be so vague. Okay. Very important to be specific, because you want to make sure that your application is complete, because you have other schools who have done their homework and have been very specific as to exactly what they want. And like Brian had mentioned before, you can reach out to Brian McGinn and his team, or our office, to find out what the dollar amount is for whatever you are putting on that application. So please, we can't stress enough to please be specific on those applications. Also, Amanda, I don't know if you have anything to add, or Richard.
Yeah, I wanted to jump in. Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you. Right, what Monica said, the more specific, the better. Also, if you have multiple projects, it really helps us if you list them in priority order and note that.
Rich, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Important thing is what Brian mentioned before. Please check in with the SCA to get a basic pricing. If you go out and get your own pricing on things, the city has certain rules that dictate, how we pay for things and what we purchase. And so they don't always align. And so I would say any project, any purchase that you would like to do with Reso A dollars, please at least check in with SCA to get a base estimate on how much it'll cost and what you will be requesting for.
Great. Also, I just want to add, if you're going to be applying for a Reso A grant, you can also apply to the city council, your local city council member, for the same grant, because the borough president, they communicate a lot with the city council members. They communicate. So they may, partner up, right, on that particular school project. So yes, definitely, I would apply to both the borough president and the city council, right? It's like that little kid, right? They want that lollipop, and it's like they'll ask the mom, they'll ask, the sister, they'll ask the grandmother, the father, and to see, who's gonna give it to him or her. So, so yeah, definitely, because, maybe one entity, right, will fund you and the other one won't, or maybe both won't be able to, but at least your application is in, and they'll know for next year, they submitted the application, and as that there's major budget cuts, and you may be considered for the following year. The capital plan is not set in stone. It all depends on what's going on with the economy. The economy changes. There could be times where something could be funded, and then there could be changes in the funding where they have to wait for another fiscal year. So it's very important to keep that in mind. But just please make sure your application is as detailed as possible. And if you have questions, you could always reach out to us. So now I just want to open it up to the Q&A. So there's some questions here. Will we receive this webinar replay? Yes, this is recorded. You will be able to see this on the queensbp.org/education. So on our page, yes, you will definitely be able to see that. Okay, here there's a question from Carrie McKeever. I'm confused with the application. Is there 3 different ideas or 3 different amounts for the same project that we're applying for? So Amanda, Richard, if you want to answer that.
Yep. So on our application, the borough president's application, we ask that you provide 3 different projects in priority order. So your number 1 priority project, give us that information. And then your number 2 priority project, give us that. And number 3, and so on. City council members do things a little bit differently. And so they might have a different process. But for us on our application, we're asking for 3 separate projects. If you only have 1 project, then that could be it too. But we ask for multiple projects because the first priority project you might have might not be, it might not be capital eligible. And we might have to go to another project. So that's why we ask for your top 3.
Thank you, Richard. Okay, there's a question here.
Wait a sec, Monica, I just want to jump in on that question because the way it's communicated, I do think it's somewhat confusing. So let's say I want a project and it's going to be $1.5 million. Is the person, or sorry, let's go with 100,000. The $100,000 project, do I apply for $100,000 to the, I think this is the question. Do I apply the $100,000 to the Queens BP, or do I apply for 75 from the BP and 25 from the city council? So we're talking about the way it was communicated. It's communicated as one pot with a subset. So I think people want just to be clear on, are they applying for one amount or two amounts?
I can answer that.
Yeah.
Okay. What I would do is I would put in the entire amount and just make sure you're on the same page, what you request for from us, and then what you are requesting for from your city council member. The BP and the city council member, we will work that out internally if they choose to fund you. So include the entire amount, please. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, it should. If not, if the person can type there in the Q&A. Brian, I know you answered this question on here, but there are also people watching who didn't get to RSVP, so I'm going to ask the question. It says, does the SCA prioritize minority-owned, women-owned businesses?
Yeah, I typed an answer in, but we have an extensive, the largest in the state actually, mentor program. And that program is for minority-owned, locally owned, and women-owned businesses. So we have a commitment to them every year that we will funnel as a certain dollar amount. It fluctuates year to year into that program. Generally, they are projects that are $1 million and less. So the Reso A program tends to feed a lot of funding into our mentor program.
Thank you, Brian. If you can, there's a request here, if you can explain about the air conditionings again, because I remember there was some funding that was set aside from the city council to have schools with children with special needs. They were going to start with those schools first for air conditioning. They just want to know again about I remember you said the electrical outlets and the electrical upgrade for the AC, but not particular. If you can just
Sure.
readdress that.
Yeah, the mayor did fund a window air conditioning unit program for every school in the city, every school classroom in the city, I should stress. That program is coming to a completion. So we've been able to provide the electrical services for window air conditioners in pretty much every school building in the city. And then we were able to secure another funding source to purchase the air conditioners themselves. This program did not apply to offices or public assembly spaces like your cafeteria or your auditorium. This was strictly for classroom and computer labs, things of that nature.
Thank you, Brian. Okay, let's see. I'm trying to find some questions here. Okay, we're gonna open it. It's open for questions, everybody. So in the middle of the screen on the bottom, you're going to see it says cute little letters, Q&A. So we want you to type in the Q&A, the little letters there, all your questions, okay? I know that there have been some questions of schools that submitted a Reso A for through the borough president, and some of them want to know what the status of that was. If Richard, if you can explain what the process was for that.
I mean, once we appropriate the funding, once we fund the project, the school construction authority takes over after that. And so if there are any issues, then the school construction authority will flag it both to the school and our office because we are the funder. But other than that, if a project is frozen, I think that's something that Brian would have to sort of answer. I know that a lot of projects were on hold because during COVID, the city put a moratorium on all new capital projects and fast forwarded all emergency projects only. And so I know that right now, projects are starting to come back online. And so projects that were frozen, you should be hearing back on whether or not they're moving forward. And I see another question here about projects that are delayed and costs increase. That actually happens a lot. And if it is funding from, let's say, our office, we provided $1 million, but then it ended up being 1.5 because of cost escalation, then our office would have to provide another $500,000, or a city council member have to find another $500,000 to do it. Similarly, with Tara's question, if your organization is asking for $300,000, I think you really have to think about, what the project is. If it is like a library upgrade and includes computers, then you can package it as one. But let's say a $300,000 project is laptops and, I don't know, new walls. Then it would have to be breaking up into two, right? So you just have to think about how you want to package each. How do you want to package your project in terms of funding? So if it's a technology upgrade, it includes multiple things. You could think about breaking it up, but if it's all going into like one tech room, then you could just keep it as one thing.
Okay, there's a question here from Somali King. Can you review again how new school buildings can be requested? Yes. So a new school building can be requested through the Community Education Council. The school can also request support from the borough president and the local city council member, who can write letters to Lorraine Grillo, the president of the School Construction Authority, supporting the project. Now, how does a school get approved, right, for an extension? You have to prove that there is a seat need. You cannot get a new school building built because you need a new gym or a new cafeteria. You have to prove, because we're talking about taxpayers' money here, right? So that's what it boils down to, taxpayers' money. So we want to make sure that that money is being maximized for school seats, because there are kids in other school districts that are really overcrowded that need that funding in order to build school extensions or a new building. So for a new building, let's say they are co-located in another building, and the building is small, and then they use, let's say, a school across the street to use their cafeteria and the gym. That was the case with one of the schools in Queens. So they did reach out to us for support, to the borough president, who supported a brand new school building to be constructed. Another thing also is, if you want a new school building and you're literally co-located in another physical building, space is very hard to come by, right? Usually they look for, I believe it's 15,000 square feet of land to build a school. We live in New York City, and unfortunately, this is not like Nebraska, Wyoming, where you have lots of land, right, to build fields of schools. So, we do look to the community to see if they know of any lots or spaces. Like, for example, sometimes you'll have a few businesses that went out of business, and so there's a few and they're all right next door to each other. That could be a possibility. Or, even if it's not 15,000 square feet, there's a school in Sunnyside where they built 2 playgrounds on different sides of the roof. They didn't have the space for a playground, but what they did, they built upwards. So the SCA can be creative with their designs, which is terrific. So if people watching us, I know there's CEC members watching us, people in the community, PTAs, principals, if you know of land that's out there, Queens is overcrowded. A lot of people want to come and live in Queens. And, please bring it up to us, because that's important for us to look at. And, we will definitely forward that information to the School Construction Authority as well. If you know of space, you can also reach out directly to the Queens, to the School Construction Authority, to their real estate department. And all that information is on their website. But it's important for us to know, so we can follow up, and stay on top to see what the status of that is. There's a question here. Let me see. And I'm going to ask people to please, be very specific with your questions. Don't write documentaries, award-winning stuff. Please put, the question, okay? PS 206, 196, 144, and now 174 were all given extensions, taking away play park space. Why 4 elementary extensions instead of a new building, all in northern part of District 28? Okay, I remember PS 196, they had an extension and then now they were getting another extension. So like I said, Queens is very popular. And I know District 28 is a growing, has always been, there has always been a need in District 28 for more schools. And as more buildings come up in District 28 and more construction comes up, more families come in, more babies are born. And so the schools get overcrowded. It's just, you know, part of living in Queens, part of living in School District 28. So, and like with PS 196, when they had that first extension, everything seemed fine, but you know, Forest Hills there in District 28 is very popular and has always, as far as I remember, there's always been a need for seats. So yes, they received 4 elementary extensions. I can tell you with PS 144, they always had this space. They always had an L-size space since the 1940s, I believe, for a school extension. But the school back in the 40s, of course, was not overcrowded. So now, after so many years, the school got the extension, which is terrific. So all right, so then there's that. Projects frozen. Okay, let me see. Any other questions? Don't be shy, folks. Take advantage of this opportunity that we're on here live. I know many of you have been at the past trainings, and that's really terrific. Many of you can give classes by now, I'm sure. I hope, right? If not, you know, we're here for any questions that you may have. Brian, I don't know if you have anything else to add.
Just briefly, something that Richard touched on. A lot of projects have been paused in buildings, even when construction had started due to the COVID pandemic. We are starting to roll those projects back out. With social distancing guidelines, we will not restart a project if it's going to take a classroom or a space that is needed to properly social distance. We will not take that classroom or space out of commission. So that is being dealt with on a case-by-case basis, and we'll kind of deal with your situation. Some schools are saying, no, you know, we have no students in the building, please come in and do the work. Some are saying they can't give up the space. So we're going to work with each individual school and identify what their needs are and, you know, then address their project, you know, accordingly.
Yeah, I just want to also add, when we're talking about building a brand new school, right? The school construction authority, what they do is they do a presentation to the community boards. And sometimes the community boards may vote in favor or against. And I remember when I used to work at the school construction authority, I was a borough manager for Queens, and I used to do these presentations. And many times you would have maybe 1 or 2 parents in the audience. And the majority were people from the community board, people who are retired, who don't want little kids in the neighborhood. And, you know, all just, you know, against the project. So it's very important for the schools to be in communication with the community boards. We will send out that information as well. So you can be connected to find out when the SCA does a presentation of a proposed project, right? Because it's proposed, because it could be knocked down. I remember there was one project specifically where the area really needed it and the community board was just adamant against it. So it's very important to get support from the school, support from the parents, to come out to these meetings and be very vocal. I remember when I was with the SCA and I was doing presentation of the capital plan to all the community education councils, the CECs. You had parents that would show up with posters and banners. Some would make T-shirts, and they would make themselves heard. And you know, unfortunately, you know, that's what it has to take. You know, for the schools to, you know, you have to do what you have to do, right? Like what they say. So many of these schools were placed on the list. They made themselves known to the CEC that they had this need. Many times they would not let the CEC know, and they would just show up the day of the SCA doing the presentation of the capital plan. So then that was like news to the CEC and news to the SCA as well. But that's all good because those projects eventually get funding. So that is very, very important. Isaac, do you want to mention anything else with the CEC?
Yeah, thanks, Monica. Yeah, it's, as you were speaking, I was thinking about, just the need for a school to be in communication, and if you're having difficulty communicating with your CEC, I know we have some in the city and not actually in Queens though, but if it happens, let me back up here. For those of you who are not aware, the CECs are going to be totally different going forward in the sense that they're going to be elected by all parents or all families in the district that they have jurisdiction over. So that election is going to be totally different. That may lead to a lot of new people, and coming in the July, starting with the July term. Of course, we're talking now with the old CECs, but I guess what I'm trying to say is this is long term. And so you have to have a relationship that's ongoing. But if you're finding that there's difficulty, then you should reach out. A lot of the presidents are appointed by Donovan Richards. And so the Borough President's Office is a great resource. And then you can also reach out even to us on the panel because they kind of come under our jurisdiction and we do get reports on their activities and so forth. So if you're just finding that you're not getting traction, maybe you're not reaching someone either the BP's office or us, and we can reach to the DOE, to FACE, and get something happening there. That being said, you need to have relationship with them. The CECs are structured to where their interface with the schools is through the school leadership teams. And in theory, each member has 2 or 3 schools that they liaise with. So there should be a contact person, but they may not have enabled that pathway of communication, especially in COVID. So you may need to push a little and reach a little, but there is a reward if you keep at it. And I've seen hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars go out because of this kind of advocacy. So please do it. Please reach out if you're having difficulty, questions, great resources on this call. I dropped my email in the chat. Feel free to reach out, please.
All right, there's a few questions here, but before that, I just want to add that the CECs, they're supposed to visit the schools. According to state law, each CEC representative they are given about 6 to 7 schools, depending on how many schools the district has. Some school districts may have 32 more or less. And so they are supposed to visit the schools and have that working relationship with the principal. Unfortunately, the way the DOE has set up the CECs, many of these CEC members work during the day. And so many of them do not visit the schools the way they should be. I know that, I know Isaac and I, we've discussed, they should have somebody permanent working on the CECs, right? So that they can, that would be great so that they can visit schools. But unfortunately, that's not the case. Many of these CEC members who are volunteers, right? They, depends on what time they have to visit schools, and some schools never get visited. Some schools don't even get a phone call to see who their representative is. So that's why it's imperative that the school principals reach out to the CECs, because like in years past, the CECs have left money, billions of dollars on the table.
I have something I just wanted to add there, Monica. All CECs have a paid administrative assistant that they're incredible at connecting the dots here. And so I don't know if it's in any packet or anywhere, but there's an email address for each CEC. It's CEC and then the district number. So it could be CEC 30 at schools.nyc.gov. An email to that AA may very well, answer some of the questions. Some of those AAs are very knowledgeable on what's happening with these projects, and they're basically helping their board, their CEC, to actually function when they, of course, have their jobs and whatnot, as they're acting as volunteers. And there's also a phone number. So you can call that office, and that might be the starting point to then finding out who is your liaison, when are they going. The CEC, the AAs keep a record of that. And so that could be very helpful, just another resource.
I also want to add, when it comes to Reso A money, the school will not be receiving the money physically. I can't tell you how many phone calls I get saying from principals, when are we getting the money? When is the check coming? The check is not coming directly to your school. The money goes directly after the Office of Management and Budget approves it. That takes a few months. Then that money goes to the School Construction Authority, and they manage that money, and then the school will receive a phone call from somebody from the School Construction Authority, who will set up a meeting for a walkthrough to see and to do measurements or do what they need to do in order to start the project. Also, once you get the funding approved, right, there have been cases where they're like, oh, you know what? We already received, like, we received donated laptops. We're not going to need this money anymore. Can we repurpose it? Right? Yeah. So the terminology is repurpose. You can repurpose it. Amanda, I don't know if you want to, or Richard want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I will. So I guess I would say, with the exception of an initiative that the BP did in the past that was specifically for technology upgrades, if a situation like Monica said does come up, more likely than not, we will try to work with you to repurpose those funds, and we'll go through SCA with that.
Okay. Another thing I want to add is that many times I remember I used to go to meetings, and there was always that one parent who was a contractor, and that contractor would give, like, a different pricing of what the School Construction Authority, was giving. And, what many schools don't realize is that, you have to factor in asbestos abatement, lead abatement, other issues, right, that are unforeseen, other things. I remember that there were issues in the past where, they had a construction plan, and then once they drilled through the wall, guess what? There was like a water pipe or electrical pipe where, it wasn't part of the plan. They had to redraw the plan, and that cost money. So the additional money had to be allocated. So, there's always, like, little things to keep in mind. So there's a question here. So just to be clear, is the first step for a school to receive a Reso A grant would be to fill out the Queensborough President's Discretionary Capital Funding Form? Richard or Amanda? I would say yes, definitely. If you don't apply for the Borough President's Reso A grants, you're not gonna get any money, okay? We're talking about money here. So if you don't apply, you're not gonna get it. Now, if you do apply and you don't get it, it could be because of budget purposes, but it will still be on record and you can always apply. But, they're not gonna know that you need funding if you don't apply. So that's very important.
Also, reach out to your council members too, because they might have their own internal due dates of when they want their schools to apply. So definitely reach out.
Yes. Also, there's a question here. Okay, is it possible to give youth in the community an opportunity for internships at the School Construction Authority? Yes, they have really wonderful internships for the youth. I don't know if Brian, if you would like to talk a little bit about that, but I remember when I was there, they had some great paid internships, as a matter of fact, for college students. I think it paid like $21 or something like that. It was really, well, I mean, it was pretty good, I think. And they would put them in the architectural department, and they would put them out in the field. I mean, it was a really, really great internship opportunity. I don't know if they have for high school students, but I don't know, maybe Brian, if you can add anything to that.
Hey everybody, this is Bianca. Brian actually had to step away. I manage projects in the Bronx and Queens, but we can certainly get more information about the internship program related to you, Monica, so that way you can circulate it among the principals.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, let's see here. Is there a training for CECs on how to get money? Most CECs leave money on the table because they don't know what to do. Well, that's why, Lynette, we're having this workshop. Thank you for joining us. That's why we're having this workshop. The borough president knows that this workshop is very important, and that's why with Borough President Donovan Richards coming aboard, he knew the importance of that, and that's why he wanted to continue having this workshop. So thank you for joining us. The invitation did go out to all and every single CEC. Can we have a list of projects open now and projected projects in each community board? You would have to reach out to the community board for that. Just to clarify, CEC can submit more projects to the SCA for funding. Yes, that is correct. I was on a phone call today with the SCA and they said the CEC can still submit a project to the SCA. Doesn't mean it's going to be funded, but if it's a big need and you reach out to us and you let us know what that need is, we can always put in a phone call to the SCA to make sure that you know that it's at least included in the application. Like I said, there has been many cuts due to the pandemic, so it's really up to the school construction authority. Now, I just want to talk quickly about well, how does a school get rated, right? How do you know what schools are going to be getting the funding? They have a system called BCAS, which 5 is the worst, 1 is pretty good. So every year you have the folks from the SCA BCAS department, they will come around and they will, you know, do a rating of the windows, the roof, the gym, everything, cafeteria. They'll rate it from a 1 to 5. The example that I had given earlier about the roof with the leaky roof, that should have been a 5, but that was not a 5. Why? Because nobody knows a school better than the principal, correct? The principal, that's like your second home, right? Aside from home, that's your second home. So it's important when the BCAS folks reach out to say that they're going to come and do a walkthrough. It's important that the principal, who's there in the building for many hours working hard, that they take that walk with that engineer from BCAS. Very important. And show them, right, what are the troubled areas. I mean, they have a list of items that they have to go through and they are going to be looking at. But it's also important. I mean, you know, there's always human error, right? Nobody's perfect. That's just how life is, right? We're human. So they may miss something. And that's why it's important for the principal to find out when they're coming. They come every year. And make time to walk around the school with them. Very important. Because if you have, excuse me, windows that are falling out, then you should be a 5 and that should be a priority. If you have bricks that are chipping and falling, we don't want an accident. We don't want somebody to be hurt. You know, that's very important for the SCA to come in and do emergency work and put up emergency netting to make sure that those bricks don't continue to fall, and then they can put in for a major exterior masonry project. So very important for the principals to make sure once BCAS reaches out from the SCA, please walk with them along with the custodian and show them where your troubled areas are. That's extremely important. Okay, let's see. Let me see if there's any more questions. All right, if you have any more questions, please put it in the Q&A. If anybody has anything to add, Deb, if you can talk about the PEP and the process when they are going to approve, like let's say, for example, there's a school that needs to be co-located somewhere else because they're going to get a brand new building constructed. And so if you can talk about that process, I know that goes through the panel for education policy, better known as the PEP, and they approve. If you can just talk about that.
As far as co-locating,
Yeah,
So, yeah, co-locating happens often when there's a new building. And it's going to take a couple of years to create that new space. So we often have school utilization proposals that we approve. And usually what we do is we go into the new building and make sure that there's enough space, but we also sometimes have to go in and reconstruct spaces to accommodate the new school for 1 year or 2 years as that construction takes place. Anything specific you want me to address on that, Monica? It's quite often that we do it when we are doing new spaces or extensions or major extensions, as Monica said. Previously, let's say they're doing a new cafeteria in a school and they've discovered asbestos and it's not safe for kids to be in that area. We relocate them to other places in the building. And if the project is really large, then we look for alternate spaces for them. But before we move children to a new space, we have to ensure that there's adequate cafeteria space, adequate science rooms, adequate auditorium and cafeteria, I think I might have said.
yeah, and that's where the Office of Space Planning from the Department of Education comes into play, where they will come in and they will check underutilized space, or they'll find space at other nearby schools.
And let me just add, because some of the parents or people on the line may have younger kids, but we often put in the past, we often put kids in trailers. And now the goal is to not utilize trailers. If at all possible, we try to find a new space for them.
Great, thanks. All right, so I don't see any more questions on here. Let me see.
Monica, there was one I dropped in the chat that I had gotten via another way. And I just wanted to put it out there for the group, just in case someone has some resources on technology grants that have been awarded or funded in the past, kind of like an example of how they would go about
I can
certain
chime in
types of
there.
things.
Yep, I can chime in there. So for technology grants, we recommend that all schools use Shop DOE or FAMIS. Schools have the ability to create accounts on both. And through there, you can look up the device that you wish to purchase and use those prices to tabulate your estimate. We also just ask that you add a 10% integrator fee to the subtotal. That way, you don't have to reduce your award amount to cover that. Of course, you can always reach out to Brian, Bennett, or myself, and we can approve that and ensure that the prices are accurate.
Can I also add to that sometimes it's better to overestimate your project than underestimate your project. And I think Brian had said the importance of reaching out to the School Construction Authority, because they can really help you with real estimates. So that's important. Don't underestimate.
Right, there's a question about.
I just want to add one quick thing to what Bianca just said. If your estimate, I don't know if the system already breaks it in, but it has to be a $50,000 minimum cost to your project as a whole. So please make sure it's above 50,000.
Yeah, there's a question also, if a school wants new furniture for, like, let's say their library, this is more for Bianca. What's the process for a school to get, let's say, school furniture that they need for their library, for example, like shelves and furniture?
Loose furniture actually isn't capitally eligible. In order to purchase furniture for a space like a library or a media center, we actually have to do a room renovation with it. So we have to be replacing the floors, new tiling, new lighting. We can only purchase furniture if it's part of a larger room reno.
Great, thank you. All right, so I don't see any more questions on here. Please take advantage. Does anybody have anything else to add? If not, I am going to give closing remarks.
Monica, I just wanted to add about advocacy and how important it is. Isaac, you're on here, so you know that unfortunately, not all projects are identified. Not all CECs are the same. Not attendance at all CEC meetings are the same. And so, you know, we do encourage you to go to your CEC meetings, to make your projects known, to work with your CEC representatives. But in addition, to do the advocacy work that is necessary with your council people, with your BP, with the PEP. I can't tell you how many projects over the course of the last 6 years that we've identified actually internally through the PEP, where we've been asked to go out and look at buildings that have been overlooked. And we've had many projects approved, needed projects that may otherwise have gone unidentified.
I just want to add, and this question is going to be for Richard and for Amanda. I know many schools, STEM is a very big thing, and they would like funding for, let's say, after school programs, I guess once school begins again, or even online school programs that have to do with coding and robotics. What role does the Borough President's office play when it comes to funding for those types of projects?
Our office traditionally has not funded that many after-school programs. What we have done is, you know, there's a lot of nonprofits who run after-school programs at different schools, and these nonprofits have to pay for the use of the school, either for having a security officer there or use of the space. And so what we have done is we've provided nonprofits with grants to cover that. And so that's like the only thing we really do in terms of after school programs. Other than that, we don't really directly give funds to schools so they can run after school programs themselves. That's not something we are able to like mechanically do in terms of funding. Like the funding, how we mechanically cannot get money to an individual school to do this. And so that's like the extent of what we've been able to do.
So in other words, if, let's say, for example, if a school has a partnership already with a not-for-profit organization, or if they know of a great not-for-profit organization that they would like to partner with, then, and in that case, then the not-for-profit organization would have to submit for funding?
Yes, that is correct.
That particular project in that specific school?
Yes.
Okay, got it. I hope you guys heard. All right, wonderful. Okay, let me just check one more time to see if there's any more questions here. Let's see. Okay, maybe this is, okay, this looks like a SEA question. The fee for school facilities has increased 500%. How do we apply for rent? Lynette, are you talking about renting space for a school? Because I can tell you the Office of Space Planning, there are schools that sometimes they find out that there is a nearby property that they can use for, let's say, a gym or could be rented out. The SCA does, aside from buying property, the SCA does rent out property as well. They will not fix the property unless it's a contract for more than 5 years. So some of these contracts can go for 75, 80 years, 50 years, 25 years. If there's like only 5 years left on the contract, then you know, they will not be doing major capital improvements in that specific building. So if there's a school out there that needs space and they feel that, for example, there's a lot of Catholic schools that have gone out of business. The SCA looks at Catholic schools to convert into public schools. Sometimes they convert them into annexes of a particular school that is overcrowded. I remember when I was at the SCA, I had a few of those projects, and they had a you know, rental agreement for several years, which really worked out for the school district, and it worked out for the landlord and everybody, all the parties involved. So yeah, the school construction authority, aside from buying land, they also rent property as well. All right, let me check if there's any more questions. All right, can you put up the 3 SCA representative email addresses again, please? I don't know, Bianca, if you have that, if not, if she's unable to put it up, that's okay, because we are going to be sending everybody the information.
Yep, I just put the information on the chat, but the presentation will be circulated, and on the last page of that presentation, all of our emails are on there.
Yes, and if Bianca, if they want to go to the SCA website, can you tell them where they can find your division under what, and the emails, just in case? Our
contact information is actually not on the website, so I wouldn't recommend going through there. I would recommend just referring to the presentation.
Okay, all right. And in either case, we're going to be emailing the PowerPoint presentation to everybody who RSVP'd. If you didn't RSVP for today, then please email education@queensbp.org, and we will be more than happy to send you the application, the PowerPoint. All right, okay, let's see. I think I see some questions here. All right, can you, it says, Richard, this is more of a Richard question. Where'd it go?
Oh, I just answered one. Sorry. Was it a question on nonprofits?
Yeah, if you could just say it out loud, because there's people who are watching through YouTube.
If you are hoping to receive funding for nonprofits, like I mentioned earlier, our website, queensbp.org/budget, we have funding applications for programmatic dollars. Similarly, the New York City Council also has funding for program dollars. So you can visit the council's website, council.nyc.gov, to learn how to apply for program expense funds for nonprofits.
Okay, schools should definitely prioritize, on the list. Like Richard has said before, there's a question here, should a school not prioritize the item or relisted? That they should definitely prioritize, okay? Let me see. Okay, must the school resubmit for completion, or is it covered under old requests?
So if a school has FY20 funding or funding from any other previous fiscal year, that funding does not expire. It was on hold, but the Office of Management and Budget just released that hold. And so you will be hearing from somebody within our architecture and engineering department to move forward and begin the scope process if it hasn't begun already.
Great. There's a question here. Parents have a hardship to get students to the other location. When the school construction authority is going to co-locate, because they're going to be, building an extension or building or whatever, and they need to take some of the kids and put them in another school building. There's a whole community process involved in that, just to make sure that, parents know and that it's best for the parents. So, that the DOE does reach out to the parents to make proposals, just to make sure that, that they do not put kids in an area that's like super far away where they have to take a bus to drop them off. So that's something that the DOE, Department of Education, works with the parents. In the past, we've also worked with the DOE on that to make sure that they do not bus kids too far away from the community, because that has happened in the past. And the board president had to get involved to make sure, especially when there was property available within walking distance, a block or two from the school.
Yeah, and Monica, just jump in on that. Being that those changes usually come before us for approval, we also ask questions, and Deb will always take point on that with Queens, to make sure that what you said is being followed. But if there are issues, then then parents can either reach, it's not good to wait to our meeting when we're trying to approve or not approve this. It's good to reach to us beforehand and speak up on this, work it through the chain of command, of course, but also we ask those questions. And so we want to hear if there's an issue with busing of students in a school utilization change.
Yeah, there's a question here. They want to know if the presentation can be emailed to other CEC members. We'll be more than happy. We're going to be sending it to all the CEC members to make sure that they are on the same foot with everybody else. Okay, but if you get it and share it with as many CEC members as you can. The information is key, and that is important. With information, you get far, right? So please, by all means, share the information. I'm just gonna double check again here, and I'm going to check my email quickly to see if anybody sent anything to me here. Okay, we will be sending the Reso A application again today. The deadline, February 25th at 5 p.m., not 5:01, like the borough president said. So if there's no other questions, if nobody has anything else to add, I would like to thank all of our panelists this afternoon, Brian McGinn and Bianca and Richard, and we have Amanda and Deb and Isaac and all the borough president staff who made this possible. Just want to thank everybody. Please be safe. Remember to use your hand sanitizer and your mask, and maybe a double mask, okay? And please be careful, please be safe, and thank you very